It just destroys your mind.
So, I mean, there's no point to going on because
Right,
it's like from my perspective, I had experienced what that teaching was trying to do. So
right.
why keep reading?
Yeah,
It was redundant at that point. And so I just wandered off. And I remember this was in a school. It was right next to the Bangkok Zoo.
mm,
So I was just wandering around. I was wandering around in the zoo and just in this place of, as you said, I mean, the way you expressed it, there was no separating out of myself, separate from everything that was being seen or heard.
right.
It was all one thing.
But presumably you can do that now in the context of this conversation with me. But it's not
It's a
quite the same
no,
thing.
no, because
What is it? Talk about the positive characteristics of this aftermath experience that is positive, not in necessarily as being good or versus bad,
right.
but positive in terms of something added to the flavor of experience that's not happening for you
Yeah,
right
I
now.
think mostly. Again, I'm not sure of this, but my sense is that it was just the newness of
Right.
that experience, and so because it came so out of the blue and
Yeah.
so unexpected, and not as the result of a systematic meditative progression.
Right.
So the change was so dramatic, so sudden, so unexpected, so without mental preparation. It's a bit like through the looking glass.
Yeah.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden, you turned inside out.
Yeah.
You know, now it's just that experience is just, and the understanding is much more familiar to me. So I
Right.
think it just doesn't have the same dramatic interest.
Right. Right. Do you think there's a difference in just in your stability in that experience, so that in the immediate aftermath of cessation, you were stabilized in that selfless
Yeah,
awareness to a degree that is not normal in your
it's hard to.
life, or
Well, it's a little hard to say because
and something kind of it must have there was it had a half life, right? So it wore off. This transfigured consciousness
yeah,
wore off
yeah,
after over
yeah,
days, or
yeah, yeah, over days.
and then
Uh,
what? Then you really wanted to
yeah,
find out what the hell had happened.
yeah, exactly. And but this was just at the end of my Peace Corps stay, so I was going home, and I had no. I mean, I had no idea of what to do or how to integrate this. But I mean, I tried talking to people about the fact that there's really no self,
Mm-hmm.
and the self is a construct. Of course,
People, meaning your rabbi in the Berkshires, or
well, to my family when I got home,
right?
even to friends before the friends in the Peace Corps,
Uh-huh.
before I left. This was just like a week or two before. So there's this huge transition happening.
Yeah.
Finishing my time in Thailand, going back to the States. Obviously, people had no way of relating to
Yeah.
what I was talking about. So when I went home, it didn't take me long to realize that I wanted to pursue this understanding. And actually, just a little anecdote. When I was home, I went up to a place called Chapel House at Colgate University. It was just to go on a little retreat myself.
Mm-hmm.
But this is before I had done any intensive practice.
Right.
But so I went up to this place, beautiful place, upstate New York, and they had a copy of that text there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got somebody to read me the
Right.
text again,
Right.
thinking, oh, maybe I can recreate this whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Nothing
nothing
happened.
happened.
Read it
Nothing
again.
happened.
Read it
Right.
again.
Right. So I realized
Louder.
that wasn't the way.
Right.
Uh, and so then I just became motivated to go back to Asia.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
This is still 1965.
no, no, this is 67.
Uh-huh.
I went into the Peace Corps in 65, and this happened just in the beginning months of 67.
Uh-huh. So you were a part of that wave of Westerners going to India, a
Yeah,
slightly early part going to
yeah,
India to meet Eastern teachers of
yeah.
esoterica.
So I was going to go back to Thailand since this is where all this happened, But I stopped in India on the way. People had given me the names of different Indian teachers and gurus. So I went in India and I was just wandering around to some different ashrams.
So Hindu ashrams and
Both,
Buddhist? And,
yeah.
So you, at this point, you were not committed to Buddhism as the context for your study?
I think I was, not so much consciously, but when I went to this one Sikh ashram that teaches this, what do you call the inner sound?
Nod yoga?
Something like that.
So, yeah.
So I went there and it was a very powerful, big ashram in the Punjab.
Right. I've got tinnitus now. I could be a master of nod
Well,
yoga.
yeah.
I could take
Well,
have a sound that is unignorable.
He was very impressive, very powerful, and everybody who went there was on the trajectory of wanting to get initiated into it. Right. So that all the pressure, the peer pressure, was to go for initiation. But there was just something in me based on this experience that said, this is not my path. So I went for a personal interview with the master, and he wasn't trying to convince me or anything. I said to him, just doesn't feel the right path for me. I think I'll go back to Thailand. And he said, I think you should stay in India.
But not necessarily with him.
No, not with him. He wasn't. So as it turned out, that proved to be a very prescient remark.
Yeah.
Whether, from my perspective...
It's a pity you could have been wearing a turban all these years.
Right. It would have been a very different path. Anyway, I'm going back to the train station to go back to Delhi, to go to Thailand again. In the rickshaw, on the way to the train station, the thought pops into my mind, well, maybe I should go to Bodh Gaya, which is the place the Buddha was enlightened. I go to Bodh Gaya, and at this time there are not that many Westerners. In Bodh Gaya there were very few. I go to this place called the Burmese Vihara, where the Westerners were staying. It was like the Burmese rest house for Burmese pilgrims. But Burma was closed at that time, so that no Burmese were coming. So the few Westerners, there were maybe 5 or 6 Westerners, they were staying there. I met some of them. They were a group of Danish people. They were studying meditation with this person named Anakarika Munindra, who had just come back from 9 years in Burma and was teaching Vipassana, or insight meditation. So he had just come back. He had started teaching in Bodh Gaya. So these Danish people said, would you like to meet Munindraji? So I went to see him. He explained the Vipassana practice, and it was an immediate connection. It's exactly what I was looking for.
But wasn't Vipassana what you had been given in Thailand?
Not really. What I had been given in Thailand was much more just the preliminary being with the breath.
Right.
So it was more like a concentration practice in a way.
Yeah.
And it was very unintensive. When I went to Munindra and he explained the practice and then I started doing it intensively, that's when I realized this is a good expression of what my experience had been.
Right. Well, for our listeners who are maybe unaware of the details of Vipassana practice, can you do just like a 2-minute guided meditation?
Yeah.
Just to get us there after you drink that water.
Yes.
That crackling water bottle that's going to ruin our audio.
Okay, so I go to Munindraji. He explains the basics of Vipassana practice, which is really simple. It's the sitting meditation part is sitting down, starting with attention on the breath, and just feeling the sensations, the experience of the breath, and being aware of moment to moment, whatever arises. Sensations in the body, thoughts, emotions. So should we do a little guided meditation?
Do like a minute or two. Just
Okay.
So that our
Okay.
listeners
So, if as you're listening to this, you just take some comfortable posture, sitting in a relaxed way. In Vipassana, generally we close our eyes, but can also be done with the eyes open. So sit, and you might begin by taking a few deep breaths, simply as a way of settling into the awareness of the body. Then let the breath come to its own natural rhythm. And simply be aware or feel the sensations of each breath as it comes into the body, as it leaves the body. It's not a breathing exercise, it's an exercise in awareness. And so we simply use the breath as a vehicle for being aware. As you feel the breath going in and out, you may become aware of sounds, background sounds or loud sounds. Then simply notice hearing. Be aware of the experience of hearing, how the sound comes and goes. Then returning to the breath. You might begin to feel other sensations in the body, of pressure, of tightness, of tingling, of vibration. If any sensation becomes predominant, become aware of the sensation. Notice how it changes. When it's no longer predominant, again return to the breath. And be aware of any thoughts or images that appear in the mind as you're feeling the in-breath and out-breath. Thought may come and at first may carry you away. You're lost in the thought. But at a certain point you become aware that you're thinking. You might make a soft mental note, thinking, to highlight and emphasize the awareness of thought rather than being lost in it. And notice what happens to the thought in the moment of awareness. Does it continue? Does it disappear? When the thought is no longer there, again return to the breath or bodily sensations. So in this way we are just being mindful moment after moment of whatever is the predominant experience in the body, in the mind. And through that awareness we begin to see the changing nature of all these phenomena. Things are arising and passing away. And in the awareness of this process of change, the mind no longer clings. And the mind of non-clinging, of non-grasping, is really the essence of the Vipassana practice.
Well, that's great. So a few things to point out there. One is that is the whole practice. So in a very short span, you can give more or less the entire practice. There's no, I mean, there's tweaking of the dials that you may want to emphasize for someone in the middle of a 3-month retreat or given whatever they happen to be experiencing. But in seed form, the whole logic of the practice was just given. What's unique about Vipassana, I think the reason why it has been adopted by so many clinicians and now scientists who are studying meditation, is that one, it doesn't require that you add anything strategically to your experience. You're not repeating a mantra, you're not visualizing something. You don't have to develop an interest in or sympathy for historical figures or potentially imaginary figures, who, deities in Hinduism or the Tibetan Buddhist canon. And so it really is just paying closer attention to whatever happens to be happening in that moment, in the mind and body. And the other very important feature of it is that it, in principle, doesn't exclude anything. So you don't need a quiet room. You don't need a comfortable body. In principle, anything you notice is as good as any other object of meditation. And that virtually every other practice can't meet those two tests. So I think it's perfectly designed for export to a secular scientific
Yes.
audience, because
Yes.
it stands to
It's
reason.
just life.
It's just life, and if you want to know something more about